Hey guys, this is Chelsea. Welcome to my channel. Today we'll talk about Motor City. This came out here recently in the Springs, but actually it came out last year at the Venice Film Festival, which I found interesting. When I was looking up the cast for this movie, I found the previous cast had like Amber Heard and Mickey Rourke attached to it, but I guess they changed it from last year till now, which is cool. But we have three main characters. We have John, Reynolds, and Sophia, played by Shailene Woodley, who I adore. So I saw this trailer a few days ago, like on a whim. When I saw the trailer, there was no dialogue in it, and I was like, oh, that's cool. They're like, doing a cool new trailer. But the actual movie doesn't really have a lot of lines in it. It has like maybe 5 lines in the entirety of it, which I found pretty interesting. But once you accept that and just like sink into the movie, you'll enjoy it a lot better. Just trust me on that. We have John, who is the main character, and Sophia, who's his love interest, and then Reynolds is the bad guy. So we open up with John and Reynolds having this head-to-head. There's like a really big fight scene, and then we're kind of brought back to the beginning of the story when they're all meet each other up. So Sophia kisses John in front of Reynolds and causes this havoc through the entire movie. So basically, she's just like trying to egg him on, but then the entire movie they're fighting over her, and it just gets like a big revenge story, essentially. Okay, I love violence. I love violent movies. It's my favorite genre. Like I'll watch in the bathtub. That's how much I love it. And there are a lot of good fight scenes in here. There was one there when like they were fighting and he drags his head down the wall, like a brick wall, which sounded really terrible. And then they had this really good fight scene in the car before they actually crash it. So there's Reynolds and John, they're fighting in the back seat, and then they had to like catch the wheel, and then they go back and they're like trying to fight each other, and then it goes off this ramp and crashes. So those are like the big scenes that I really loved in this movie. Now, that being said, because there's not a lot of dialogue and there was a lot of violence, we had to really rely heavily on the actors. It was like a masterclass in acting, I would say. They had to emote a lot. There was a lot that they had to explain through other avenues as opposed to the dialogue. So there was this talisman as a way to push the movie forward. Like there was the wedding ring in there. Because eventually that gets passed around a lot as a mechanism to explain a lot that happens in the plot itself. So John proposes to Sophia, and it's like this really big thing, and they're super happy. But then as soon as that happens, it all comes crashing down because John gets framed for a crime that he didn't commit. His car gets stolen, and then he finds a neighborhood with a bunch of inside of it. And so we find out that Reynolds is the one who actually framed him because he didn't like that he's with Sophia. So Reynolds frames John because he didn't like that he's with Sophia, and then he goes to jail for a very, very long time. While he's in jail, Reynolds gets back with Sophia. They have their own life of luxury. They're just like having fun during the day. They're partying, and she picks that life with him because she thinks that, John's a criminal. He's in jail, and so she's like, I'm a waitress. What else am I gonna do, right? Let me just attach myself to Reynolds. Not that she didn't like him. I do think that she actually liked when they had a chemistry, but it just seemed to me like she wanted to get out of her waitress life, and that's why she kind of went with Reynolds, being this big kingpin in this, this crime boss guy. And it was cool because we see this ring exchange throughout the movie, like I said. So at first they get engaged, and that's all great. And then we see one of the detectives give Sophia back the ring later at another date because he's trying to tell her that John was framed. So she gets the ring, she finds this out, and that detective is obviously. But then she gives the ring to Reynolds at Christmas later to show him that she knows that he framed John. So there was that sort of piece as well. And then later we see the ring come into the bullet that John uses to shoot at Reynolds. So he puts the ring in this bullet to use later on Reynolds. And so that piece kind of carries through again. And so the ring is really used as this vehicle to explain a lot of the plot points in the movie that would maybe be better explained with dialogue, or would have been explained with dialogue normally, right? But I also feel like this movie really worked without a lot of the dialogue because we as an audience have seen this movie many times, right? Not saying that it's like typical, but it is a blueprint for a lot of what we see with crime movies and love triangles and all of that. We're very going back to basics here with this movie, which I really liked because it we had to rely a lot on our own imagination and the things in between, the things that normally happen in the movie, right? So in that sense, with people not talking as much, you are just sort of putting the pieces together yourself, but also in a way that there's a framework, because we know guy meets girl, right? There's a revenge story, the good versus bad, will they, won't they, who does she love more? Like, these are all basic things, right, that we see in a lot of movies. But I feel like here it really worked because it brought us back, like I said, to a point where, okay, you've seen this before. What connections are you going to make? Okay, so because they had to really act their butts off in this movie, there was this really amazing scene that I remember when they're in the diner and Sophia is serving a customer. She turns around, she sees Reynolds. At first, she's scared. She looks very terrified, right? Because this guy has a lot of history with her. I'm sure they have like a lot of fights together and like a lot of trauma. So like that's like the sort of background that we're getting from their relationship. And so she's really afraid of him. She seems afraid to confront him. But then he turns the coffee cup over as an invitation for her to come in with the coffee, right? So she pours in the cup, but then she takes a sip of his cup. And I took that as like, I'll do my job, but she's like trying, there's like a power dynamic, right? There's like pulling back and forth between the two of them. And so she takes a sip of the cup, she puts it down. And then she pours her own cup, she sits down across from him, and they're still like making eyes at each other. It's nothing really like too serious yet, right? They're still like, there's tension still. And then he takes out his cigarette, he lights it, and he offers one to her. She refuses it. She takes her own cigarette out of her pocket. She lights it up. He offers to light up for her. She then takes his hand and guides it toward the cigarette because she doesn't fully trust him, but she'll let him give her a little bit, right? So they're just like kind of seeing where the boundary is and how far they can tiptoe close to that line is what I was getting from it. And then it's funny because after she does that, they laugh together. So it's like, it's almost like a game. Like they were playing to see if they would get back together, and then they eventually laugh. And then, but we know as an audience that they're going back to toxicity, right? Like they weren't going to do it, but they were going to do it all along. And then they fall into it. And they had to explain all of that without anyone talking. So I feel like those sort of moments, I'm just curious like how they actually broke that down, right? Like when the actors are talking, are they like, okay, I'll do this, and then we'll do this, and we'll do this? Because like I know that the script will have that in there, like the actions, but when you're actually in the scene, I would imagine that they have to go over that a lot, right? Like what the movements are going to be, how they're going to choreograph that. And then they had to do that multiple times throughout the movie, though. They had to do that over and over and over again, which I feel like that's why I keep harping on it, because I've seen so many movies without dialogue. I've seen so many of them, but to do it in this way, I feel, especially with the music in the background, like this was very soundtrack heavy, like songs that a lot of people will know, some people might not know, but a majority of people know these songs, and so I feel like that also brought some emotion to it, like the connection that people have with the song, carrying them through as well. And I don't know, personally, I love movies where there's just minimal characters and minimal things going on, because it's like, what are you really going to do with that, right? What are you going to do when what normally is in a movie isn't there? So that's mainly why I really liked this film. I wouldn't say it was necessarily fantastic or like jaw-dropping, but I do feel like it's worth going to see, because like the cinematography shots as well were brilliant, like when they were doing slow-mos with the gun, with like the fights and stuff, like all of that I think was really beautiful. It was like visually and aesthetically like something that I feel would be in a film school. I don't know, the devices that they used, like with the ring and just relying on their facial expressions. Yeah, I don't know, it was very intriguing to me in that sense. I also really love the last scene with Reynolds and John speaking to each other, because after all this time, right, they have that big blowout scene, the car crashes, and they both come out alive. But at the same time, it's like, y'all can't really keep doing this, right? Like, y'all gotta go, the cops are coming. They had to leave at that point and like go their separate ways. And then so all this time, all his life, John is just trying to find Reynolds. And then they're like 80, 90 years old. He finally sent them this letter like, it took a long time to find you. You're hard to track down. and then they have their conversation. That is the longest, that is like the conversation of the movie. Like that end part was pretty much the entire movie, right? They're talking about their love for her. Reynolds is like, I loved her. John is like, I still love her. And even though these men hate each other, like they can agree on that, like how much that woman affected their lives, even if it was a short amount of time, you know. But I just adore like that much hatred, you know, to like go your whole life and to have that revenge. That is a long game right there. Like that's dedication for sure. And I don't really see that much in action movies, right? I feel like they fight and they get over with pretty much in that movie. Like they're not going decades and decades and decades and decades later. Like they're not old people fighting each other. I feel like that's not something that I see that frequently. So to see that happen was really cool. Like at the end of their life, they were still thinking about this, and he still found his way to Reynolds, and he still got his revenge. That is dedication. Crazy. And I feel like also throughout the movie, we're seeing how differently these men love Sophia, right? Reynolds, I feel, is possessive and passionate and chaotic, and it was like a lot of energy exchange through them. But then you have John, who knew her for a very short amount of time, very protective of her, like they seem to have a lot of fun together. And then when you see John and Reynolds fight later, and then she jumps in front of John, and then Reynolds is like, oh dang, like you really love this man, like take a bullet for him. Yeah, you're down for this man. So to see that too, like come across and see his realization of the woman that he loves so much, loving someone else so much more, and like how fiercely she wanted to protect him. I'm sure there's a lot for Reynolds to see in that moment. So just seeing all of that play out too, like in that real time, was really fantastic. I feel like the best movies that I see are ones that I'm not expecting, like the ones that I'm just like seeing the trailer for randomly and then decide to go see. You know, because that's what happened here. Like I was just like, oh, it's playing. Let me go check it out, and it worked out. It worked out well. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Leave me yours down below, and I'll see you guys for next time. Have a good day.